intensely focus on personal growth, whether intellectual, physical, skill-based, or emotional, you're sending a clear signal to your nervous system. This is important. This is what I want to prioritize. And the brain will begin to respond by strengthening the neural circuits related to that behavior, gradually turning it into a part of you, no longer dependent on motivation or inspiration. Let's return to the principle of neuroplasticity. Your brain isn't fixed. It's constantly changing to adapt to how you live, think, and act. Every repeated behavior is a vote for the version of yourself you're building. And here's the crucial part. The more intentional and focused a behavior is, the deeper its neural imprint becomes. This means that if you spend 1 hour a day learning a new skill, journaling, exercising, or meditating with full presence, you're establishing powerful neural connections that support the long-term sustainability and growth of that behavior. However, the reality is that most of us underestimate the value of 1 hour. We're swept up in a society that glorifies speed and instant results. Meanwhile, real change, and I emphasize sustainable change, is the result of slow but steady accumulation. 1 hour a day might not show immediate results, but if you persist, it will become the solid momentum behind everything you want to achieve. It's like laying one brick each day. At first, you see nothing remarkable, but after a few months, you look back and realize you've built a wall. You don't need to wake up at 5 a.m., and you don't need to follow a rigid routine. All you need is 1 hour of daily commitment at any time that suits you, with one condition. You must be fully present in that hour. No distractions, no compromises, no going through the motions. That hour is the time you give yourself to move closer to the person you want to become. Every minute you invest in it is a part of the future you're building. And the beautiful thing is, you don't need any special conditions to begin. No major resources, no innate talent, no one's permission. You just need to make one simple choice. Today, I will start dedicating 1 hour to myself. Once you truly understand that major transformation begins with small decisions, you'll stop looking for miracles out there. Because the real miracle isn't somewhere far away, it lies in how you choose to use 1 hour a day. If there's one time in the day that has the most profound impact on your brain, behavior, and energy, it's the first hour after you wake up. Not because it's a socially ideal time, but because from a neuroscience perspective, morning is an incredibly sensitive phase for setting the biological and cognitive tone for the rest of the day. Your brain at that moment is like a computer that has just restarted. All systems are fresh. Mental patterns have not yet been influenced by noise or chaos. And in that state, the first choices you make send a powerful signal indicating how you're about to program yourself for the day ahead. However, this is also the moment when most people unconsciously drop their biggest opportunity. Instead of using the first hour to shape their internal state, they let themselves be swept away by external triggers, a phone notification, a negative news headline, an unexpected work email. These seemingly trivial actions are how you surrender control of your nervous system to the outside world. And the danger is your brain doesn't know you're just checking quickly or replying for a second. It only knows you started your day in a reactive, not proactive state. It doesn't require a complex routine or a long duration. You just need to design a simple, meaningful, and consistent sequence to repeat each morning. This not only helps you begin the day in a proactive state, but does something even more important. It resets your entire nervous system, which is gradually becoming overloaded by ongoing chaos. Each time you prioritize stillness, awareness, and control at the start of your day, you create a positive biological chain reaction. Cortisol stabilizes instead of spiking. Dopamine is generated from within rather than relying on external stimuli. And most importantly, you send a clear signal to your brain, I am the one steering the direction of my life. So if you truly want to change your life, don't start with a big goal. Start with one quiet, intentional hour in the morning, carried out with firm commitment. Because that quietness doesn't just calm the nervous system, it lays the foundation for an effective day, a clear life, and a future you consciously own. There's a truth often underestimated in modern life. The value of time doesn't lie in its length, but in the level of focus and intention you give to it. And if there's any block of time during the day that holds the greatest potential to impact your mental state, emotional clarity, and behavioral direction, it's the time you set aside for inner growth. Usually the first hour of the day or the quiet moments before bed. I call this the high value time zone, not because it's lengthy or flashy, but because it's a space you use to invest in a better version of yourself. Ironically, the most valuable blocks of time are also the ones most easily intruded upon. No one comes and steals it blatantly. It's taken in subtler ways. A message that seems urgent, an email with a tempting subject line, a phone call that will only take a minute, or even your own drifting thoughts when you haven't clearly defined what you want from that period. Bit by bit, these elements erode your focus, fragment your mental energy, and cost you not just an hour, but your ability to fully own yourself in the most precious moments of the day. That's why I believe protecting high-value time zones isn't just a time management habit, it's a nervous system protection strategy. Every time you interrupt a period of deep focus, you force your brain to switch attention modes, disrupting deep processing and derailing the physiological rhythm you were forming. And if this happens repeatedly, you'll find it increasingly hard to concentrate, to stay committed, and most importantly, you'll slowly lose the sense of agency over yourself. It doesn't happen all at once, but builds up over each just a minute moment. So to protect that time block, I set simple but clear boundaries. No phones, no emails, no notifications, no multitasking. I schedule my growth hour like a non-cancelable appointment. I inform those close to me that this is a time not to be interrupted, not because I'm distant, but because I take my personal development seriously. And I remind myself every day, if I don't value this hour, no one else will do it for me. Remember, high value time isn't a calendar gap. It's not leftover time. It's a strategic investment fund for your cognitive capacity, clarity, and long-term willpower. If you disregard it, you'll find yourself constantly in reactive mode, busy but not clear, exhausted without knowing why. But if you begin treating it like sacred territory, where only what nourishes you is allowed in, you'll notice a visible shift in your days, your weeks, and the entire path you're walking. I want you to picture this. Time is the only asset you cannot store or recreate, but you can increase its value by using it with purpose and by guarding it from what does not serve you. Every minute you protect from distraction is a minute you lay the foundation for a stronger, clearer, and more empowered version of yourself. So guard your high-value time zone as you would guard a treasure. Because the truth is, not everyone has an hour to rebuild their life, but you do. And what you choose to do with it will write the entire story that follows. Before you begin any task, before you open a book, jot down an idea, or hit start on a workout, ask yourself this: where am I heading? The question may sound simple, but it's the foundation of every meaningful action. Because if you're unclear about the destination, no matter how hard you work, your effort can become meaningless expenditure. The brain, like a navigation system, needs a clear destination to mobilize its resources, focus, emotions, energy, and time in the same direction. If you skip this step, you're not just wasting time, you're gradually weakening your capacity for decision-making and long-term behavioral commitment. I've seen many people start their day with a to-do list, then get swept away like machines in nonstop motion. But when asked, what are you moving toward? They hesitate. They know they're busy, but not what they're busy for. And this is one of the reasons many people feel empty, even when they seem productive, because action without direction creates motion, not progress. And the absence of a sense of moving towards something meaningful is what slowly drains our motivation. That's why at the beginning of every focused hour, I spend 3 to 5 minutes realigning with my goals. I write them down, not just think about them. What skill I'm developing today, what problem I'm solving, and why it matters for my future. Writing by hand turns vagueness into clarity. It sets a cognitive state guided by intention rather than reaction. And when action is tied to a specific purpose, your focus deepens, procrastination drops, and your confidence begins to grow. Picture this. You walk into a room and instead of just working, you tell yourself, I'm here to build something meaningful. You'll feel a shift in the way you sit, the way you begin, and the way you handle those sluggish, lazy first minutes. It's not because you have more energy than others. It's because you have a goal guiding you. So now I ask you something honest. This morning, when you started your day, did you know where you were going? If you've ever acted without direction, or if today is the first time you want to begin with a clear goal, let me know in the comments. Just write, I'm ready, or simply the number 1. So I know you're stepping into this journey with intention, because when you begin by knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it, you don't just work more effectively, you begin to become someone capable of shaping their own future. And that's when action is no longer just labor, it becomes forward movement. There's an interesting paradox in our time. We live in an ocean of information, yet we're finding it harder than ever to truly learn something with depth. Not because we lack resources, but because we lack intention in how we choose and engage with knowledge. The brain, by nature, doesn't develop automatically over time. It develops when you place it in a state of purposeful, structured, and repetitive learning. If you let your mind drift passively, scrolling through feeds, watching random videos, listening to unfiltered podcasts, you slowly build a habit of fragmented, shallow, disconnected intake that makes deep thinking difficult. I believe one of the most important habits you can develop on your journey of self-transformation is to dedicate 1 hour each day to active learning. Not learning for entertainment, not learning to pass time, but learning to cause a real cognitive restructuring, because learning the right way doesn't just change what you know. It changes how you think, how you analyze, and how you make decisions. Think of it like a gym for the mind. Just as muscles grow when placed under enough pressure and repetition, the brain also needs controlled challenges, where you read material outside your comfort zone, take notes, ask questions, and connect concepts. The moments you feel mentally stretched, slightly confused, are when new neural connections are forming. That's how the nervous system expands its processing capacity and builds resilience to higher complexity. What you learn matters, but how you learn matters more. Don't start your day with a random article online. Pre-select your input, 3 quality books, 1 specific course, 1 trusted podcast channel. Place them on your desk. Prepare your learning environment just like you would for a serious workout, because when you enter your learning hour with preparation and seriousness, you're sending a clear signal. This isn't random. This is part of a long-term life strategy. And the beautiful thing is, after just a few weeks, you'll start to notice ripple effects. You'll speak more clearly, think more coherently, make decisions more swiftly, and solve problems with less emotional turbulence. Because you're not just accumulating information, you've restructured the entire cognitive system that governs your life. Active learning isn't just a pathway to knowledge, it's the solid foundation for a deeper, more confident, and more insightful version of you day by day. There's a common misconception that many of us carry, that skills come from knowledge, that if you just read enough books, listen to enough podcasts, or watch enough videos, you'll become skilled, confident, and proficient. But the truth is, skills don't come from what you know, they come from what you do and how often you repeat it until it becomes a natural part of your nervous system. Knowledge is the starting point, but repetition is the true path to capability. If you've ever learned a new language, played a musical instrument, or practiced a sport, you'll know there is no perfect first time. No one is great right away. Every skill starts awkward, clumsy, and uncertain. But if you continue, repeat, refine, and repeat again, you'll start to feel the shift. And that shift isn't just doing better, it's your brain forming new connections, processing faster, reducing hesitation, and turning action into reflex. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and change. It doesn't happen when you simply read something interesting. It happens when you act, repeat, and commit to the process. And most powerfully, it happens when you repeat actions with presence and a clear goal, not just going through the motions for the sake of checking a box. So if you want to improve your writing, write every day, even if it's just a short paragraph. If you want to speak more fluently, practice speaking aloud daily, even if it's just for a few minutes. If you're learning design, business, photography, investing, or any other skill, stop waiting to feel ready and start acting as soon as you learn something new. I've realized most people don't lack knowledge. They lack structured, consistent behavior. They think they're not good enough to start, but not starting is exactly what keeps them from ever becoming good. That's why I always devote part of my personal development hour to hands-on practice. Not waiting for perfection, but accepting that the first version will be rough and building from there. Because every repetition, no matter how small, is another brick in the foundation of your skill. Action doesn't need to be dramatic, but it must be consistent. Repetition doesn't need to be perfect, but it must be pointed in the right direction. And when you make intentional repetition a part of your daily habits, you're not just learning a new skill. You're becoming someone who can turn knowledge into real-world value. That's when you move from simply knowing what's right to doing what's right, naturally, confidently, and with strength. There's something subtle that fast growers consistently do differently. They don't just act, they observe their own actions. Because progress isn't about how much you do, but about what you learn from what you've done. That's why feedback and adjustment aren't optional extras. They are essential to every sustainable growth process. If you keep taking action without pausing to evaluate, you'll likely fall into a common trap, repeating the same mistakes, only faster. And that doesn't lead to progress. It just leads to burnout in a loop. Every time you engage in an intentional behavior, whether learning something new, writing a paragraph, practicing speaking, or refining communication skills, take a few minutes afterward to ask yourself, what did I do better today than yesterday? What am I still stuck on? If I could do it again, what would I change? These questions not only clarify your results, but also help you pinpoint the exact bottlenecks in your development process. When you clearly know what's holding you back, you can solve it strategically rather than react vaguely out of emotion. I often end a learning or deep work session with a moment of quiet, not to relax, but to reflect on the action just taken, like holding up a truthful mirror. I jot down a few lines about what I absorbed, what needs improvement, and one small step I can take differently tomorrow. This feedback, though simple, carries enormous power. It allows me to adjust early before mistakes become habits. Think of it like adjusting the direction of an airplane during a long journey. A tiny correction early on can make a massive difference in where you land. Adjustment doesn't mean starting over. It's a form of subtle upgrading. It's how you tell yourself, I did well, and I can do even better. This is a powerful message to send to your nervous system, that you're not just a person who acts, but a person who can adapt, refine, and evolve over time. And when feedback becomes a habit, you'll find yourself improving faster, with more clarity and fewer stumbles, because you're not letting errors pile up before you address them. Success doesn't come from avoiding mistakes. It comes from continuously learning from small ones, adjusting quickly, and accumulating improvement over time. If you want to accelerate your personal growth journey, don't just focus on doing more. Start focusing on doing better, smarter, and more precisely through every cycle of feedback and refinement you intentionally create for yourself, because sometimes adjusting your course by just 1 degree can change the entire trajectory of your life forever. We often set ambitious goals, career success, skill mastery, financial freedom, but there's one thing we easily forget along the way, that all effort becomes meaningless if your body is depleted and your meaningful relationships begin to crack. You can build a business, sharpen your intellect, and optimize your time. But if you no longer have the health to enjoy the fruits of your labor, or no one by your side to share the joy, is that success truly complete? In every sustainable ecosystem, there are 2 essential sources of energy: biological energy from a healthy body and emotional energy from genuine connection. And if you don't intentionally integrate them into your daily routine, you're quietly allowing the foundation of your life to erode. The body is not just a vessel for the mind, it's the biological base that determines the quality of your thinking, your emotional resilience, and your capacity to focus. A depleted mind cannot be creative. A brain lacking nourishment, movement, and rest gradually loses its sharpness. That's why I devote a portion of my golden hour each day to intentional movement. This could be walking outdoors, gentle yoga, deep breathing, or simply stretching wide awake by the window. These seemingly small acts send a powerful biological signal that I am nurturing and regenerating my nervous system. And you can start too. No gym, no fancy tools. Just a small daily commitment to your body. But health is only one part. The other comes from connection. In a world hyper-connected by technology but emotionally drifting apart, making quality time for your loved ones becomes priceless. A deep conversation with your partner, a tight hug with your child, a sincere check-in with your parents, or even just quietly sitting beside someone you love. These moments don't look like achievements, but they are the emotional foundation for lasting balance. If you don't deliberately include them in your personal ecosystem, you risk trading them away for things that are urgent but not important. And one day when you turn back seeking connection, you may realize you've gone too far. So treat health and connection as two pillars of a holistic growth journey. Give them fixed places in your schedule, not as leftover time, but as non-negotiable components of your life strategy. 1 hour a day to listen to your body and 1 hour a week to truly listen to someone close to you may not get you to success faster, but they will absolutely get you there more sustainably, more kindly, and more completely. And sometimes that's what matters most. When we talk about personal transformation, we often imagine explosive moments, dramatic breakthroughs, grand turning points. But if you look deeper, if you really observe those who've quietly but steadily made lasting change, you'll see this. Transformation doesn't come from one monumental shift. It comes from hundreds of small, intentional actions repeated each day. Not loud, not theatrical, but persistent and profound enough to reshape how your brain responds to the world. Every hour you spend learning, focusing, practicing, caring for your health, or nurturing a connection is a biological signal to your nervous system that says, I am choosing a different path. When you repeat that signal daily, your brain begins to reorganize itself. Old neural pathways weaken, new ones strengthen, and something remarkable happens. You no longer have to try to become someone new. You naturally start to be that person. Your mindset changes, your habits shift, and gradually, even your inner identity evolves. Science calls this phenomenon neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to rewire itself. But I want you to think of it as a quiet reconstruction. Every small act you repeat, whether it's 10 minutes of reading, 5 minutes of journaling, or a meaningful conversation, is a brick. You don't build a structure in one night. You just place one brick well each day. But if you stay consistent long enough, you'll eventually look up and realize you're no longer who you used to be, not because you're pretending, but because you've slowly assembled a better version of yourself piece by piece through the behaviors you chose. And here's what matters most. That accumulation doesn't just create skills or results. It creates new beliefs about who you are. You start to believe you are someone who can commit